Hello again and welcome everyone. My name is Adam and I'm a Strategic Alliance Manager here in Safetica. Today I will be walking you through the expert insights about the future of the compliance and the present as well. Together with me, I've invited several of experts in that field. We have Elias Tsapsides, the branch manager of Eset, Cyprus and Malta. Hello, Elias.
Hello, Adam. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for coming. Then we also have Lukáš Bajgar, who is a GDPR data protection officer in OKIN. Hello, Lukáši.
Hello, nice to meet you.
And last but not least, we have Dan Remiage, who is a senior security consultant at Lufthansa Systems. Hello, Dan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
All right, great. So now let's get to it. First of all, I just wanted to provide you with a short introduction and summary. We're going to talk about regulatory compliance today, especially in the EU. The main part of this gathering will be a panel discussion and expert insights. We're going to also briefly talk about Safetica compliance, an additional module that focuses on providing you services to ensure compliance with data regulatory standards. And at the last part, we're going to do a Q&A session. So please, I encourage you, if you have any additional questions, something that you would like to ask our experts, feel free to use the chat of the GoToWebinar to ask the questions throughout the webinar, and at the end we are gonna review those questions. All of the questions will be answered. If not on this webinar, we will provide you a written reply as a reaction after the webinar. All right, so first of all, I just want to quickly go through some of the important buzzwords. I'm sure you're all familiar with those, but for those who are not maybe entirely sure, I just wanted to quickly review them. So first of all, the one that we all know, GDPR. GDPR is a data privacy regulation that came into the effect in 2018, and it aims to safeguard the fundamental rights and freedoms of individuals concerning the processing of personal data. So it emphasized the importance of data privacy, security, and transparency. Some of the key provisions of GDPR are that it grants individuals control over their personal data, including their right to access, rectify, and erase such information. So this puts a lot of requirements on the companies to ensure that the data that they are protecting the data by design. They need to be able to report data breaches and appoint data protection officers, DPOs, where necessary. NIS2 is a part of the EU's, my apologies, cybersecurity strategy. It focuses on strengthening the resilience of critical infrastructure, and it also promotes the cybersecurity cooperation among the EU member states. And it's just another initiative that EU has to consolidate and control the cybersecurity. The key provisions of NIS2 is that it requires operators of essential services. So it's mainly targeting the energy companies, finance companies, and those parts of the critical infrastructure. And those digital service providers to implement robust cybersecurity measures, and once again, report the incidents and cooperate with the authorities to enhance the overall cybersecurity. DORA, as well proposed by the EU Commission, addresses the operational resilience of digital services. So we are now focusing on ensuring the continuous availability and reliability. DORA sets the requirements for incident reporting, risk management, and business continuity planning. It affects digital service providers such as cloud services, online banking platforms, etc. So once again, it aims to enhance the stability of the digital infrastructure. And then we are going to talk a bit about the Data Act and the AI Act, and especially in the second part of this panel discussion, we are going to focus on those and what does it mean for the future. So Data Act is a proposed regulation aimed at harmonizing data and sharing rules within the EU and promoting the data-driven innovation. The key provisions are that the Data Act intends to facilitate data sharing across sectors. It's emphasizing the data access, data portability, and data governance. And last but not least, we have the AI Act as well. which is proposed by the EU Commission as well, and it focuses more on the ethical and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. It's 2023. AI is a buzzword that you hear in every other sentence, and there is a growing. I would say that a lot of people are concerned about how the AI, where the AI is heading, and how it is or is not controlled. So we're going to talk about this as well. So the AI Act introduces the risk-based AI regulation, categorizing AI systems and into different risk tiers. It mandates transparency, human oversight, and accountability for AI developers and users. So the aim is to achieve a balance between innovation and responsible AI use. All right, so now when we have when I briefly explained the key buzzwords of this webinar, I would like to kickstart the panel discussion. We're going to focus on all of the above, but we are also gonna talk about the personal experience. That's why our guests are here to share their experience. So first, I would like to start with Elias and ask him, how do you make sure that the company organization complies with the current regulations? And you can see it not just in your company, but also among your partners and customers, that during this process of digitalization and introduction of the systems, what are the best tips and tricks? What are your personal experience with the intent of being compliant with the regulations? So it's more of an open question. Elias, please take it away.
Since the nature of our business is cybersecurity and data protection, we are also partnered with Safetica, as you know. So among our solutions is also are the tools for data protection. So it's our job to actually make sure that our customers, our partners, are up to date with all the information regarding GDPR when it started back in 2018, with NIS2, with DORA, with the Data Act, AI Act. All these acts are coming because of certain reason. So when GDPR started, it was a reaction to what was happening in the market, to unattended access to customer data, how it was handled, to whom it was handed, because most of the companies gathering end customer data, they used to expose that data to third parties, to sell the data, and so on. So in this type of chaotic market, you need to be able to regulate the data that you are gathering, and there has to be some sort of supervision in order to prevent that. So in our experience, most of these regulations are coming as a reaction. So we are living in a reactive economy and reactive markets when something has to happen in order for the Euro Commission or the local authorities to start taking action. So in most cases, this is associated with extra spending from the companies, because in order to be able to provide some sort of security for data, you need to implement some sort of solutions, whether that is starting implementing practices in your company, doing data categorization, having some sort of data classification, and then ways to protect that data. So when GDPR came, it had to do more with end user data. When we are talking about DORA and NIS2, those are reactive regulations coming in effect based on certain facts. For example, when the war in Ukraine started, the first thing that happened was the critical infrastructure of the country was hit using cyber attacks, and that actually had a huge effect in the beginning and disrupted many of the chains of command, chains of financial market, governmental institutions, and so on. And having a bad example of one case actually made, I believe, in my opinion, made Euro Commission and all the authority to come up with more regulations that would be imposed in most of the countries. And because nobody is acting unless they are made to act, unfortunately, as I repeat myself, we live in reactive economy. We are having this type of regulations, putting things in their place, making sure that the essential and the most important organizations and institutions are protected. We have bad examples from our local market as well, which we can talk later if you want some examples. We can discuss it.
Great, thank you very much. Oh, maybe one additional question. I would like to understand from your perspective, how do you perceive that the compliance, the GDPR changed after the 5 years? Because most of the companies at this time have addressed, and I totally agree with you, are in a reactive way towards the GDPR and data privacy regulations in general. So are there any specific regulations that you think most companies are struggling with or have not yet reacted properly and fully? GDPR is also a very broad term, but it has been around for 5 years. So how do you perceive this evolved?
Yeah, so definitely we are in a better place than we were when GDPR just announced. People were, to be honest, scared about the fact that there will be penalties for not complying with GDPR. That was the main driver of people implementing different solutions. I'm not talking about bigger enterprises where they had data regulations and data protection mechanisms implemented long before that. We are talking about 10, 15 years ago. But we're talking about small to medium business where things are not handled by DPOs, for example. Before GDPR, there were no data protection officers. So in most cases, after 2018, people started getting aware, with our help as well, with their partners and other companies providing this type of consultation. People are more aware of this fact than they used to be 5, 6 years ago. So we're in a better place than we were before, but we still have a long way to go. What we see, at least in our region, is that more and more companies are implementing different types of solutions, and fortunately, more and more people understand that data is their main asset, which has to be protected, because the consequences of data leakage are much more devastating than just spending some time and some resources implementing proper solutions in place for data protection. So we are in better place than we were, but we still have a long way to go. It of course also has to do with data protection authorities that are there in places. For example, here in Cyprus, we see much stronger data regulation, and we have an authority which is taking actions and supervising different organizations. So things are getting better. In some other markets that we are also represented, we see that it is not the case. When there are no penalties, when there is no proper regulation of proper monitoring of the situation, then people become more reluctant, because nobody wants to spend extra euro on something that they feel that is not going to happen to them. And this is the mentality that, especially in Mediterranean, we see that people feel that it's not going to happen to us. It's usually going to happen to our neighbor, somebody else, but not us, until it happens, and then the results are devastating and terrifying. So we have to be proactive. This is the most important word, I would say. We have to be proactive about everything.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, how it has changed in the past 5 years is that when GDPR came into practice, it was like a big red flag that the EU is waving, like watch out how you handle your data. But it was mainly targeted towards the big corporations and big companies. But nowadays, as it is evolving and as the whole world is becoming digitalized and everything is online and your data are stored in every store you go, they want your email address there, your cell phone number there. It's more and more important, even for the small companies, to be prepared and to have some tools to help them to be compliant with not just GDPR, but the others. We're going to talk about them later on, is Tudora, etc. So I wanted to ask you, obviously, Elias, we have been working together for quite some time. You have been using different tools, but what are the other tools and not just the software tools, but also anything that you can think about? What are the tools that either your company or your customers or partners are using to ensure the compliance, to have the visibility, to be able to react to an incident in a way that is described in GDPR? Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, of course. Anything that has to do with data protection starts from procedures. So in order to be able to be proactive and to do things right, you need to have procedures, processes to know steps, how you collect the data, how you store the data, how you use it, and how you protect it. So in order to have all the steps, software is anything that has to do with the digital data. Most of the data is digitized, but still we have a lot of data that is printed, a lot of data that is stored in cabinets and so on. So it has to start from physical security, having regulated access to different areas, having different types of information. Surveillance, of course, limited by the regulation as well, as we know that biometrics are not allowed in most cases unless if it's absolutely necessary. So what we use, we have a combination of physical security and digital security in place, including solutions such as DLP, along with encryption for data that is usually people have it with them traveling, etc. And then the most important is to have the procedures, making sure who is accessing the files, what type of files, where these files are stored, how they are secured. This is the usual process that we go on about. So there are people that are specializing in data categorization and data classification. We have some partners that work together that assist our customers with this type of projects. Mm-hmm. We do it ourselves as well, to the extent where we can provide this type of services. But in general, it has to be, put in 2 steps in order to be able to maximize the effect of data protection and combining all these solutions. There is no silver bullet for everyone, because, for example, in case of cybersecurity that has to do with malware, we know that there is no single customer wanting one type of malware, but not the other type of malware. With data protection, every customer, every company is different. So you need to have different type of approaches to each unique case. There are companies that work strictly with digital information. There are companies that work with both. There are companies that work mainly with hard copies of whatever they have, the invoices, the customer data, etc. So digitization is happening, but it's taking different paces in different markets and in different industries. So mm-hmm. It's again up to the markets and industries. In Central Europe, for example, I know in Northern things are happening much faster than they're happening in South Europe and the Mediterranean, for example.
But I very I liked your point about the physical security, because this is often an aspect, especially us who work in the cybersecurity space, we don't get in touch that regularly with, but it's a very important part of the GDPR, not only to protect the sensitive information that are digitalized, but also those that are physically present. And I think that among all the different tools that are contributing towards the compliance and being compliant with the GDPR, it starts with the visibility, and then of course the more advanced tools such as data classification, risk assessment, and the actual protection of sensitive data. But a lot of the companies, even now after 5 years, still have some gaps in the visibility, and in the preparations for some audits they need to be able to identify where their sensitive data are, no matter if it's in the cloud, on the server, or in the drawer under my desk. So really great point. All right, so now I would like to take a little detour from the compliance part and talk about something that hit the world by storm, especially this year, and that's ChatGPT and OpenAI in general. We can see that artificial intelligence has evolved rapidly, and especially with the introduction of ChatGPT by OpenAI, we can see that this industry and this part of the internet is evolving much faster than probably the authorities and the governments and the regulations are prepared for. So I just wanted to ask you, Elias, what are your experience with the ChatGPT? Do you use ChatGPT? What is your opinion on it? What are the possible risks that you see, just from your personal experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is, especially in our industry, you wouldn't find a single individual that haven't tried it, haven't used it. I've used it. I'm using it just cautiously, but mainly for academic reasons, to be honest. The thing with the AI is that, it was actually, it's a buzzword now, but AI itself was a thing even back in 1950s. It started as a concept to use sort of machine to generate new piece of information. But back in the 50s, the processing power was not enough in order to accommodate what we have now. So, for example, if we talk about cybersecurity, our company, I'm talking about Eset, used to have some sort of machine learning even back in 1997. So it was first introduced, because there is no way you can analyze and process big amounts of data without using some sort of AI. And when we come to proactive protection, new information generation, or instant on-the-fly information processing, you need to have some sort of machine learning, and as we call neural networks, which process the data and come up with unique type of answers or information. Now in 2023, we have adequate amount of processing power. We have proper software underlying and proper mechanisms to be able to generate quality information and quality responses. Plus, in 2023, now we have so much information digitized and available for AI to come up with any type of responses, any type of answers. The biggest issue is that, AI is here. It's not going anywhere. I believe its purpose is great. It's going to serve us well, unless we don't regulate it properly. It's not a coincidence, I believe, that AI Act and Data Act are coming together in effect. The reason is being that when you have something so powerful, you need to be able to regulate it, to what type of information it has access to, in what ways it uses that data. So we have so much customer information and data out in the open, and then we have AI that can use it against companies, against all of us. So it has to be regulated, and I believe this is what the Data Act and AI Act is going to do. Is going to implement the ways we will be able to use this new great technology. Definitely, AI is going to replace some of the jobs, especially those that have to do with data processing, because when you need to analyze the information that is being input and then output some sort of information that is based on that information, I think there is no better way to do it other than to use AI. But again, we really have to be careful, because we have a term saying that, garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't use proper data and quality data with AI, the consequences and the end result might be unpredictable when it comes to AI.
That's a good point. We have this saying in Czech. I will do my best to translate it, and I think it fits to AI really well. AI is a good servant, but it can be a very dangerous or bad boss. So we need to watch out, and we need to be able to control it, because especially if you have been on the internet in 2023, you can see that there are a lot of AI fakes. And people, if you have been speaking somewhere on the internet, there is a database of your voice, and the AI can generate something. So I think it's really important in terms of the validity and truthiness of the information for AI to be controlled. And it's definitely something that we should not be afraid of, but we need to be careful in utilizing. Thank you, Elias. I will come to you in a second. I just wanted to ask Lukáš as well, since you are talking about the ChatGPT right now. What are your experiences? What is your opinion on ChatGPT? Do you utilize it if you're in your everyday work? Do you not utilize it? How do you view the ChatGPT? Is it a tool? Is it a danger?
So, from my point of view, I suppose, or I think that ChatGPT or AI or at all these supporting tools can be, as you told us, it can be a good servant, but in many cases, I'm challenging employees and their own creativity, and I think that's the most dangerous part of ChatGPT and AI. Because if you are working, or if you try to own company, you try to have, as Elias told us, you have to have all these guidelines, procedures, or some other stuff you need to implement into your company. But if your own employees doesn't know or doesn't trust to AI and try to just create with their best owns, like own creativity, like asking questions ChatGPT, what can I do in these particular cases? What can I do? And then without any following of procedures or some guidelines, and try to implement everything just into the praxis, I think in that case it can be very dangerous, because many times, like as Elias told, maybe twice or third time, like you try to have some like best, or try to have the best communication strategy with your clients, with your customers, with employees, and everything is about trust. And in the case you try to go to tender, you try to have a new client, you try to implement new software, trying to use or improve your procedure and process in your company within GDPR, within whistleblowing, within everything, and your own company try to implement his own creativity without following your rules. In that case, it can be very dangerous, because, as I told you, in many cases, your client is, for example, following RBA codex. It's like something like ethical codex for its international ethical codex for company, and they try to follow all these rules, all stuff. And in case your own employee fails with his own creativity, in that case you can be in a very dangerous situation, like you lose trust, you can lose your business, and you can lose your own employees or colleagues of this employee. So in that case it can be very dangerous. But I think we can speak about some better things, like for example, in many cases, ChatGPT for programmers can be very useful, because just create new parts of code from scratch in the 21st century is something like, from my point of view, it's stupid, because everything was involved somewhere by someone somewhere, and in that case, if you just need to create some new software using basic steps, just use ChatGPT. But in that case, you definitely need something like quality manager who will approve that this code is valid, that this code is not violating your own rules, your own procedures, your own guidelines. So in that case, you have to combine many positions in your company just to be compliant, and just to be compliant with this ChatGPT or AI. And what's maybe the most significant rule to me and to our company, that we have to start with really basics, and this basic comes from GDPR, and I think we can implement into all topics within your company. If you are working with IT, just minimize your data, meet retention periods, I think, and that's very needed to be followed by every and each employee, every and each boss and management level, because many times the fails or some data breaches are not from the common employee just typing some codes, but from management level too. And as I told a few seconds ago, we have to minimize data and try to remove all not valid, all old paper data we have in our companies. Because many times we know we are in the 21st century, and we try to have everything to have like our
some archives.
Yeah, some archives. Yeah, sorry that I need to ask you for the word. So we still try to have some archives for paper documents, and I don't understand why, if we know that legal requirements in many cases just are okay with the digital stamp of data. So in that case, if we minimize our data, and we can use ChatGPT in that way, that we are not providing sensitive or know-how or IT data directly into the GPT, we can use the best of all in that case.
Great. I will get to you in a second. I have additional questions to ask you. You already started to talk about GDPR and the others. We will get to that in a second. I just wanted to ask Elias one more question. You have been talking about the specifics and that each region is different, Mediterranean, Central Europe, etc. I wanted to ask you, what are your biggest challenges that you are facing when we talk about compliance? And specifically talking about the area you are in, Cyprus is known to be a hub for a lot of companies that are focused on trading, on online trading. Do you see any different need or anything specific that you are handling regarding the compliance in your region?
Yeah, definitely. As you correctly pointed out, we have a lot of trading and forex companies based in Cyprus, which leads to the fact that most of these companies collect data from a lot of European citizens, not only from Cyprus, but from across Europe, but from third world countries as well. But since GDPR regulates this type of information, as well as we have also Cyprus Exchange organization, which is so-called CISEC, which has its own regulations for these companies, and before they acquire any type of certification, they need to be able to comply with all the requirements, including data protection and customer usage, fair usage compliance as well. Some of them, they are not compliant. I don't know how exactly the process is going, but in those cases, when they do the auditing from these Cyprus Exchange regulatory, in most cases, the license is being revoked. So they actually go and check their servers, where they store the data, how the data is used, and that is also part of our Cyprus, the authority that is enforcing GDPR as well. The biggest challenge is not the financial sector, because in the financial sector and especially in trading sector as well, in most cases there are certain procedures in place. The biggest challenge is not in bigger companies, like for example with Lufthansa. I'm sure Dan can confirm that there has been regulation and procedures like 10-15 years ago, because these type of companies, they are too big to fail and they cannot afford having their name exposed and their reputation being hit by data leakage or non-compliance. So the biggest problem is with SMBs, smaller companies that do not have the resources to be able to implement not only the procedures, but to, as you said, to even identify their critical processes. So the first thing that a company should do in order to be compliant with any sort of requirement is to identify the critical processes. So what are the critical processes? How do we collect the data? How we use them? Which are the channels that we receive the data from? Where we store the data? So in order to do that, you need resources. Resources come with money, and that money usually is overseen by the CFOs, by the CEOs, by the owners of the companies. If they do not see anything tangible, something that they can understand, they can feel, they won't be able to, they wouldn't be investing in any tools or processes to optimize, enhance their data security. So what we do usually, we usually implement some sort of tools. In our power, it's data protection tools such as DLP, auditing tools, and tools that can actually identify all the processes happening within the network. After this happens, we usually do perform a presentation with people in charge, people that can actually understand the risks that are associated with data leakage and non-compliance. In most cases, I would say over 90% of the cases, when people see the actual facts, they do react based on them. And this has actually helped for us to increase the awareness and our revenue as well when it comes to data protection. I would say fivefold during the last 5 years. So it's a very fast growing industry. It's a very fast growing sector, which is going to grow even more, especially with NIS 2 and DORA, because while the financial institutions such as banks and those that are mostly associated with DORA, they have something in place already. NIS is there to impose and protect mainly those institutions that are critical, but in most cases were not regulated, and there were no proper tools in place to ensure data protection in such organizations, the data resilience, the survivability in case of a disaster or an external targeted attack, for example. So in a nutshell, the main challenge is ignorance and lack of understanding of the consequences and lack of tools to be able to identify the critical processes for each individual organization and company.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Elias. And I would like to now continue with Lukáš. You mentioned other topics that we are focused on today and other regulations such as NIS2 and DORA. So I wanted to ask Lukáš, and it may be a bit broader question, so I will let you to focus on the parts that you would like to share with us. But I would like to ask about the DORA and NIS2. How do you prepare organization for it, and how is your current experience with actions towards compliance with these regulations?
I have to say that many things were spoken by Elias at all, but in fact, in our companies we already started, because fortunately we both have ISO 27001 and also automotive TISAX certifications. So for examples, we have a lot of procedures and processes already in place, so not just on paper but actively in place. So if you go to our IT department and ask for their software and all their stuff they made already to be compliant with these certifications, for example, so they will share you all the stuff and all the procedures. They are already needed to have NIS2 and DORA in place, not fully for 100%, but I can guarantee you for 95% at all. So the basic premise is just to recognize what are these cyber risks that can cost a company business, because at the moment we can identify, let's say, thousands and thousands cyber risks for each company at all, in Czech, in Slovakia, in Cyprus, everywhere. But if you are working or if you own company, you have to focus at all mostly on all risks which can cost or which can lose the business you have at the moment. So and on the risk which are competitive advantage for gaining money to you or to your company. So it's not needed just to prepare, like maybe it's not nice to speak about it loudly now, but for me it's better to prepare all these regulations and procedures and processes in a way you are happy with, and you cannot lose your business, you cannot lose your employees, you cannot lose the trust of environment, of authorities, and of your partners. So you have to start with people, as Elias told. So if you are working, or while you are working on individual threat security systems, you have to actively educate and train employees as well as senior management, because the risk is mainly there on senior management level. Then you have to train and to teach people that there are some phishing messages, that there are some other stuff, and we need to secure end users directly in. For example, I think that many people or many companies are using Outlook. So we or our companies proactively continuously test users by sending some fake emails and text messages with the ability to report an attack. So employees many times just click and we see that, oh, aha, we got you. But we are happy that mostly 90% of all employees just report that like phishing attack. And I'm happy that in that case we can proactively do something more than just IT software, some initialization from their point of view, but also that education. And I think that this education and these individual areas are the best way how to start with not just NIS2 and DORA, but with cybersecurity at all. So on the other hand, you have to have all these password policies, some policy for user rights, administration, and system security, and physical security, and logical security. Yeah, but I think that in the 21st century, you are working in some bigger company. It's the way, it's something like when you wake up, you know that you have to do this. And if you have some bigger company, you know, you try to have everything in place. And then the only risk is to work with people, with clients, customers. And that's all from my point of view for DORA and NIS2.
Yeah, I think you raised a very important point that it really is at the end of the day about the people and about their education, about their cybersecurity awareness. And I think there is a great difference between set policies and something that is somewhere on the company's intranet web page that the people can read, and then the actual real life, the actual test of the phishing emails, etc. And I can see it from my point of view as a part of Safetica. We focus mainly on the internal threats, right? So we are not focused that much on the phishing or on the malware attacks, etc. But the internal threats, and I can see that majority of the time the data leaks that are happening from employees are not intentional, are not a data theft, but are a mistake and a human error. And it's simply the employees not being aware about the risks of sharing the data outside of the safe company environment, the risk of using public repositories, the risk of sending sensitive data to public email addresses, etc. So this is a great point, Lukáš.
And
would you like to react, Elias? Yeah? Sorry.
Yeah, I will let Lukáš to finish, and then I wanted to add something. Yes. So, apologies, Lukáš.
Just I got the one mention that as I know Safetica, so from my point of view, it's like perfect tool. Like you can prohibit the use of external drives, USB flash disks, and so on. Because I think that the biggest risk is there that you can just put your data from your company laptop, for instance, to some USB disk and go outside and just to sell to your partner or just give like a gift because I want to work somewhere else. So all these regulations are like must in these times and in the times of home offices at all.
Yeah, this is the most important point that Lukáš pointed out, is that in 99% of the cases, the employees, even if they do data leakage, it's unintentional. But that one single guy who, for example, if we think about the story of Edward Snowden, even countries as big, as powerful as US, they sometimes oversee this type of things, and it's usually the people that have the most access, the most intelligent people that know their ways, that do the biggest damage. So that one particular case is worth investing and making sure that it doesn't happen. So you need to harden your security as much as you can and put processes in place for anyone who might do the harm, especially the ones that have the biggest potential of doing so.
And that's a great point, because if we talk about regulatory compliance, a lot of the people, they see the malware attacks, they see the phishing, but it's much more complex than that. And not only the insider threats, but also the privileged access management. why this person has access to this type of information. Does he need to have access to this type of information? And often we see, especially in the smaller companies that do not have the IT personnel or the capacities to enforce and set up these rules correctly, that just to simplify it, let's give everyone full access, right? What can happen? So a lot of these shortcuts and things that maybe not all the companies are putting effort in and focus on can result in data leaks, can result in data breaches, and can result in conflicts with the regulatory compliances.
For instance,
right,
just one thing, maybe the last from this point of view, that it was maybe last week in our company that one employee just sent in one email password and username for some server, and you can do whatever you want, you can do whatever you need, but if there is this employee element in place who just try to be as quick as possible and try to help the other side, and in that case you cannot do anything else. So every time you have to educate employees, you have to send this just like fake emails and just to educate by this way, not only by some learning or by some offline training by HR.
Yeah, and once again, it comes back to the education, to the cybersecurity awareness, because if you don't teach people that they should use multiple sources, maybe send a password, one-time password, and send it via the short text message as an alternative source. So these are the things that definitely are still well, some of us take it as for granted and take it as usual and as common, but not all the people who are working in the companies, and it's not only IT companies, right? Every company has to focus on these regulations.
And still I'm talking, but in that case, if we use AI properly, we can have some tools which can just guarantee that this email will not be sent, and that's all. So we can combine the cybersecurity with AI if we know how. That's all.
Great. So you've been talking about the NIS2, about DORA, about ChatGPT. I would like to ask you, maybe if you can share some tips with our audience. What are your favorite tools to use? What are your tools that you use to make your life easier, to help understand and have the visibility about the data flow in the companies? And more importantly, what are tools that you use to ensure that the company stays as compliant as possible and as ready towards not just the existing data privacy regulations, but the upcoming that soon will be enforced, like the NIS2 and DORA? So what are your favorite tools? What are your some tips and tricks that you use in your everyday life to spread the awareness about the cybersecurity, and also to understand how people are working and what are the vulnerable areas?
So if the question is for me or to Elias?
I wanted to ask you, but of course you can all answer Dan as well. I just wanted for you to ask, in your everyday life, in your work, what are the tools that are your favorite that you are using
Maybe I'll be very brief, because as I'm data protection officer, I'm not using some sophisticated tools at all, because still my role is not just to educate and to report breaches at all, but still I'm like office man, so I'm using just tools like Excel, Outlook, and Word, and so on. So, but on the other hand, we got, for instance, it's a Slovakian tool, Oznamto, for whistleblowing. So it's Slovakian solution, and we are using for that case. For GDPR at all, we got some internal software just created for my purpose. So I was just delegating IT, just please create this tool, for instance, because I need to have some records for processes of personal data. It's one it's one of the point of my job as DPO, and we got some internal software just for me created to use it. So I cannot tell you some famous brands because we got just private created for my own. On the other hand, sometimes we are in touch with basic Microsoft tools because at the moment I think that because of many penalties European Union give to Microsoft, they are really prepared for GDPR with their tools inside cloud systems. So I can, for instance, if some employee is creating some Excel file with the list of employees, so we can track the document because it's the policy of our company. Just that we can trace, we can find, and we can, for instance, we can forbid to send email with these attachments. So I'm proactively using Microsoft tools, as still I suppose Microsoft is one of the most used tool or solution in a company in Europe at all. So that's my answer to your question.
Great. Thank you very much, Lukáš. And of course, feel free to jump into the conversation. Elias?
I think, yes, I think we're the ones selling the sticks. So I want to hear from Dan, considering how big Lufthansa is and how much data they might be processing. I'm very curious to hear how they're using those sticks and his insight on all this.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of tools, it's what they are, right? They're tools. So you need to have those processes, and those tools are really just there to help you. So if you look at, let's say, purely information security and this underlying cyber security program, you know, there's so many industry players. You can use CyberArk as your PAM, privilege access management. You can use all those tools that fulfill those individual sections. Like, okay, you have access controls and you have 10 different tools to actually help you to comply with that, but it has to be meaningful for your organization. It's not just that, all right, this is a tool. What is important here is to differentiate whether that's a sales buzzword. Okay, we will sell you a tool that's going to solve your GDPR issues. No, it's not. Your processes should come first, and based on that, you select a tool. I think there is a epidemic in IT world where people, buy a tool and then they try to find a use case for it. That's not how it should work. And I don't want to in particular discuss individual tools because, again, I'm not advocating security for obscurity, but I don't think you should be discussing what kind of tool you are using for instance, for access control or for cryptography or for this and that, because that's your internal in the company. What is important is the process. And then when you actually identify this business problem you're trying to solve, there's so many vendors. But my recommendation would be, don't fall for the sales trap. There's no single bullet. There's not a tool, not an antivirus, not a GDPR related tool that's going to solve your problem. Your processes will solve that, and then you buy a tool for it, but not the other way around. So I'm not really, and I'm also myself personally, even though I come from the IT world originally, I'm also an office guy. So I personally don't work with, of course, I'm using Linux as my personal machine, but that's a different story. But yeah.
All right, great.
Adam, something that Dan mentioned, that there is no silver bullet and that no single application can solve your problems. And something that we have also identified, that in most cases when companies acquire a certain tool or software, in most cases they are not implementing it correctly. So just by purchasing a DLP, for example, or a PAM, if you don't configure it to full extent, if you don't do your policies with the tool and making it as strict as possible, you're just spending your company money worthlessly. You know, it's just money thrown away. So apart from identifying the issue and then acquiring a solution to that particular problem, apart from that, you should also make sure that that solution is properly implemented after you have acquired it. This is one of the most important things that we see the IT personnel overseeing and not fulfilling to full extent.
Yeah, and I think that
I would have just a little good example that's a very good point, Elias. And like, look at Azure Information Protection for Microsoft. I think most companies already have it, so you can classify and protect your documents like internal, public, confidential, strictly confidential, whatever your classification is. Great, but if you don't teach your employees what it means a confidential information, they don't know. And sometimes you enable that feature and your user base doesn't even know, yeah, well, there's some new button, what it means, right? And maybe it takes years for them to actually start using that feature. So the technology is not gonna save you. Like you need to educate, and you need to have a processes first and technology supporting it later.
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to follow up on what you said, that I think the companies should focus on what are the vulnerable areas, what are the critical areas that we need to fix, and then find the right tools for it, of course. And from my experience, I've been working in Safetica for 6+ years, and I've been doing some project implementations before I was focusing on a strategic alliance. I think that there are two types of customers or two types of companies. One company is that they have done some audit, they have done an internal analysis of the risks, and they are very clear in what they need. And if we are talking about the internal threats and DLP right now, how they want to classify the data, how they want to protect them, how they want to keep them in the safe company environment. But the second part, and that's majority of the companies, is they simply know they need to be compliant and with some data privacy regulation, but they have no idea where their data are stored. They have no idea who has access to those data. They have no idea if the users or the employees even understand that such data are sensitive and can cause harm when being released. That's why I think it's important to identify the critical areas first. And when we do the implementations, we can do an analysis during the trial, during the POC, where we are trying to understand what's the environment of the customer, how the users are working with the data, and based on that you can then identify this is critical, we need to classify those sensitive financial data, we need to classify those data from the HR, etc.
And maybe
yeah, that's the point.
I will just follow Dan's thought, like just use something like common sense, because GDPR 5 years ago we got the same situation. Many attorney and some companies tries to scare companies and then just try to certificate with some, let's say, fake stamp, and it's their business model. Like nowadays with ESG, with whistleblowing, with everything. So there's no GDPR stamp, it's nothing. It's just attorney's mark, it's their brand, just sell their product. So I think it's not needed anymore, because 5 years ago, each website had this GDPR just label somewhere, we are compliant, but it's just some fake information, just you paid to someone just to give you something. So it's just much more about your processes, your procedures, and about just common sense. So if you have all this in place, then you can purchase some software like your Safetica solution, because for instance, if you want to disallow usage of some software, so I think that in many cases you don't know how, but if you have some intelligent solution, just buy it. But mostly you need to identify what you want, what you need. And that's what Dan speak about.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to just repeat what Elias was saying, that these are the tools. They are not the the result, or they are not gonna fix the problem itself. So they are a tool that need to be utilized. They need to be implemented. They need to be used in a way that covers all the critical areas. All right. So moving on, I wanted to ask Dan about, now talking about the future, about how do you perceive the future of compliance will evolve? What do you think the major challenges for the companies will be in the future? We have talked about the challenges that currently the companies have. They don't identify the use cases. They buy the tools for the sake of it. They don't implement them properly. But how do you think this is going to evolve? And with the new data privacy regulations coming in place, how this will affect the companies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think first of all, it's I don't have to mention again that probably it's going to be more challenging for small to medium businesses always, because for them it's very often very first encounter with security, privacy, regulations of this sort. So they need to either upskill themselves or find reliable partners that gonna help them. That's a first issue, because big companies, we already do it. You know, we already do it for years. Maybe big companies have a very complex quality management system, so you can build upon that. So you can use the knowledge from the quality management and transfer it maybe to security. So I think the main issue and the main challenge in the future would be, like, everybody in this room or around the world is a criminal technically, because we are all breaking the laws, because nobody knows all the laws that relate to us. I think that's the major challenge, is really to identify what you have to do first. Now, you have, depending on the industry, depending on the country, you have GDPR, you have DORA, you have NIS2, you have PCI DSS for the credit cards, you have Sarbanes-Oxley if you're a publicly traded company, then you have specific regulations for the specific industries. On top of that, you have maybe your ISO 27001, you have maybe SOC 2, and now you have so many regulations and so many standards, and each of them have like, what, 200 pages of read, and they are not good read. It's like, it really seems it was written by ChatGPT, so it's a very dry material. So first you need to identify all those rules and regulations. And in our case, in Lufthansa case, we have lawyers doing that, right? So we have, first they collect what is applicable for us, and then you have security practitioners actually translating this into the reality. So I think the first challenge is the vast amount of those regulations, and what the future is going to bring. It's going to bring more, because looking at the trend of EU, we have more and more regulations on everything. We'll have more regulations on information security as well. I don't think it's necessarily going to help at some point, because the main challenge I see is that those regulatory bodies, they are not cooperating. So you would have your ISO 27001 audit, you had to have your SOX audit, you have all those, and unfortunately the way they create those regulations is they take 27001, maybe American NIST's cybersecurity framework, and they sprinkle a little bit on the top so that it looks different and they can demonstrate some work.
Yes.
Now you have your ISO 27001, but it's not good enough anymore, because there's something little on the top that you have to do. So I think that's the major challenge, and the solution, I would say, for the companies that already, like, okay, first solution, start now, because otherwise it's too late. I think it makes the business question the value of this ISO 27001, because then they say, all right, we have this certificate, but what is it good for? Lukáš said it quite well. It made me thinking, actually, like, it helps you a lot, because you already are in that mentality of plan, do, check, act cycle. And you already know, all right, like, how do we, like what do we need to do to improve, to adhere to the regulation? We already have access control, we already have cryptography, we already have this, and business continuity. Okay, so we look what's new, and we just embed it in the ISMS, in the information security management system. So the way to solve it is use what you have and make it just add those additional regulations on top of that, and look for the similarities. Don't do like two things twice. If you have your TOMS, the technical and organizational measures for the GDPR, that's already a security controls. You can use them for the different scenarios as well. You don't have to build new, and you don't have to write a new documentation. Fix and modify your existing documentation so that it fits all those aspects, because otherwise you're killing yourself from the bureaucratic perspective, right? So I think, yeah, we'll have more and more. We have to deal with it. So we have to consolidate, and we have to be able to understand where we have overlap and where we can reuse stuff we already have. I think
that's a great point, and I just wanted to follow up because you mentioned that there is going to be new regulations, and they are. I can see it with cooperation with our partners all over the world, not just in the EU, that the GDPR has been this groundbreaking thing and this standard, and now every company, each country or each region is adopting something similar. I call it the GDPR mutation. So a lot of these are very, very similar. And I wanted to follow up and ask a bit, if you can comment a bit on your perception of Data Act and AI Act. How is this evolving, and how this will change the whole regulatory compliance space?
So I think I would mainly talk about the AI Act, because that's the one I'm more familiar with, and I remember what Elias said there. I really liked it, that the AI is not so new. We already have it for so many years, and again, IT specifically is an industry of buzzwords. It's a sales tactics, and there's lots of IT systems that are already in place. So in terms of AI, for instance, now looking purely at the data protection, so you have a system like ChatGPT, right? Okay, you need to create a framework internally or on the regulatory space not to send your personal or company or whatever data in that tool. Why do you have to do that? I mean, we already had it for so many years. You had your Google Translate, right? Or tools like Grammarly. Like if you put like sensitive business email into the Google Translate, it's already a Google's property technically, whatever your policies are. So it's not so new. So well, don't send your confidential data into any tool like that unless you are very confident what they do with it, what is the privacy policy, etc. So that's the first part. Second, on the AI Act, they are going in this direction of, let's say, human-centric approach. They want to make sure that AI is not gonna go rogue and harm anyone or whatever. What they do is they split it into different layers. So for the company, it's important to determine, again, map it, differentiate where you are. Are you consuming AI or producing AI? If you're consuming only, all right, fine, just make sure you don't put any confidential data there. If you're producing AI, you need to see in which bucket you are. They have, I think, high risk or unacceptable risk. That's a social profiling. So you need to make sure ethically that you don't do that. And you have a high risk. That's like biometric systems to make sure that you, like your facial recognition or whatever system is not creating profiles of people, whatever. And then you have lower risks, video games, etc. I think ChatGPT and the chatbots are in a lower risk section. I'm not quite sure now. So you need to determine where you are, and now it's not going to be so much IT or process driven. I think It's going to be rather on a company strategy and on a product level. What is it that you are creating and how you are creating it? So are you creating an AI system that's going to be used to create malware? And if you are not, if you're just ChatGPT, how do you make sure that you build safeguards that your system cannot be used to create malware? So this is very, very important. But I think it's going to be very difficult to translate, and I think it's going to be on this level of a company, product, whatever strategy. How do we build ethics around it? And if our tool is capable of doing something bad, how do we make sure that it doesn't do it? But for me, it's very, very funny, because actually I was looking at the annex of the regulation, and it's so difficult to translate sometimes. I think that's going to be major challenge for the companies. How do you translate ethics into that business process? Because looking at, like, for instance, one part of the annex, I have it here on the screen, is like, you cannot build an AI system. It's a prohibited AI practice. You cannot place on the market or put service that uses AI to deploy subliminal techniques beyond person's consciousness to materially distort person behavior that's likely to cause harm, or psychological or physiological harm, which in theory, if you look at marketing and sales and advertisement, what is it? Putting subliminal messages in order to buy your product. Okay, it's not intentionally harm, unless the product is really bad and it harms your pocket. But where do we distinguish, okay, this is unethical? Because sometimes people do it, right? They do unethical practices in order to either sell you something or trick you into something. And we still do it as humans. How do we build it in an AI as a safeguard? And how do we audit it? So I have, unfortunately, on this front, more questions than answers. I think this regulation would be very, very interesting to see in the practical world, but for, I think, audience is rather a determining where you are, what you build. If you really build a biometric system, make sure that you adhere to some standard hygiene. First of all, data protection, obviously, but then some ethical aspects. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see.
So maybe I just add 2 notes about this. The first thing is just the compliance program, from my point of view, is just a long-term and never-ending process. And it's not just about protecting data, but from my point of view, it's about protecting the single person as a whole. Because once you protect your employee, your person, so you win the game, but it's never-ending game. So that's the first question. And the second part is maybe about this AI in the future, because for instance, if you imagine you're an HR manager, you turn on your computer with your two-factor authentication, verification, whatever, you set your some private data at all, but once the AI is so intelligent that in that case it can start its work, because you're already logged in the system, and in that case AI can just start its work, like dipping some data or sending some data. So I think we have to be prepared for this case, that we have to use some future AI to recognize this malware or spyware or something AI in the future, because they can just wait for the right moment at all.
Very good point. I might have one little comment on here. I think it's very dangerous to actually restrict something, because then you are preventing the progress, and it's not possible, because then the progress is going to be made somewhere in the basement. And one good example is the academia. So in the universities, actually banning ChatGPT to write something, I think that's a bad move, because that's not what you're going to do in the future. And in reality, people's going to use it to do the work. However, the system needs to evolve. So you might need, and it's already being built, an counter AI system that will verify whether your work is completely written by ChatGPT. I mean, you can use it to help, and many people used before to like the grammar checking tools to check your grammar. Like, is it cheating or is it not cheating, right? So you need to be able, there is a progress, and you need to be able to, you know, that's this ethical use. All right, like if I just write me a bachelor thesis, boom, it's done. Then you need to have a counter AI system that's going to verify, all right, this has been completely written by AI and this person didn't do anything at all. But if you are using it to help and to actually synthesize and build new knowledge, then it's meaningful and beneficial.
Just wanted to add my opinion here as well, because you know, when discussing regulations, when discussing data protection, when discussing ChatGPT and AI and platforms that can process data and generate some new information, it's like, you know, reminds me of global warming. When EU is trying to impose some regulations on green energy, cutting the CO2 emissions and so on, but if we do it and we all breathe the same atmosphere globally, and there is a country on the other side of the world which is emitting triple the emissions, we set a good example, but it has to be done everywhere in order to be efficient. So if we prohibit AI and ChatGPT in EU, as we see with malware, the servers with malware and bots are hosted in North Korea, in South America, in countries where it's not regulated. So while we have a global internet, there is no way you can isolate something and prohibit it in one region. So as the guys correctly noted, we should not prohibit, we should regulate it, we should invest in proper understanding of how this works and how we can actually optimize the work. And most of all, we need to make a platform that can identify something generated by AI and at least help us to understand, I mean, how we can improve. So if somebody wants to use, like, I remember when we were kids, there were no Wikipedias, there were no platforms where you could find information. You had to, I was going to library and reading the books and finding the information through the books. So now they can have information, find it just within a few seconds in Wikipedia. I mean, it's not bad having a quick access to information, having a quick ways of generating new piece of information is not bad actually. It is going to speed up the process, but we need to understand it better, and we need to learn how to work in better ways with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we're almost running out of time. I just wanted to ask Dan, there are a lot of things that I wanted to ask you, and we can go on and spend the whole Monday here, but we all have jobs to do, and so does the attendees of the webinar. I just wanted to ask one last final question. If you can just quickly mention about DORA or NIS2, where do you see the main challenges, especially in your position with those regulations, and what are the basic steps that you would recommend taking in order to be prepared for those?
Yeah, I think a lot has been already said, and especially with the NIS2, I think just very briefly, very simply, do your basic hygiene, map your assets now, and mainly in the businesses, allocate the budget for security now. Because if you don't start now, it's a lengthy process, right? So for many companies, it's going to be completely new, and I think it's important to decide and be honest with ourselves. Do you want to do it for the compliance only, or do you want to actually secure your company and your data? Because there are two different things, right? So if you are actually honest with yourself and you say, all right, like we actually want to secure our data, okay, then you have to do proper risk assessment that will identify the gaps that you have, and you build your processes around that. And I would say don't only stick with the let's say best practices, because that's what they are best practices, but it doesn't mean they are best for you. So you need a professional partner or professional internal employees that will help you to identify where the risks are, where your assets are, and that's same for DORA and same for NIS, with a little bit differences. We don't have time to go into details, but based on that, you can start creating your processes. But for this, you need an expert and you need budget. But make it in a way that is proportionate to the risk that you are facing. Because small companies, yes, they have less money, but they also face less risk. So you need to be able to justify this in front of the regulators as well. Very often they're going to challenge you, but you also have to challenge them, explaining this is what we have, this is what works for us. Because I've seen sometimes two different risk assessments, one that are for you internally, that work for you, for your company, and another one that are shown to the regulators or the auditors because that's what they understand. And this should not be the case. You should have one that works for you and be able to justify it and have courage to justify it. You know, that's the because then it's visible that this system works for you, and you have a system of managing the risks, identifying them, and applying meaningful and relevant security controls. And when you document that, you should be fine.
All right. Thank you. Before we say our goodbye, we're almost at the end of our time. I just wanted to quickly mention one thing that we already spoke about, and it's the utilization of the tools. One thing is having the tool, another one is being able to utilize it properly. And I just wanted to mention that we have an additional module in Safetica called Safetica Compliance. This module, what it does is, thanks to our strategic partnership with Netflix, a leading company in data classification categories, we have established this additional module that allows you to import predefined data categories that are related to the specific data privacy regulations, such as GDPR, but not only the broad and universal ones, but also the ones more specific for certain industries, such as HIPAA for the medical data, PCI DSS for the financial institutions. Of course, if you would like to know more information, feel free to reach out. Since a lot of the attendees of the webinar are the customers or partners of Safetica, I just wanted to mention this as an option. And additionally, also for all the attendees, if you just go to safetica.com and check regulatory compliance, we have a huge list of the most common regulations and compliance standards, and how Safetica can be utilized to cover the parts, and which parts of these compliance regulations can be achieved or can be covered by utilization of Safetica. 11:30 on the dot. It has been a very productive hour and a half. Thank you, Lukáš, Elias, and Dan, and thank everyone who joined today's webinar. We definitely, as I mentioned, could be speaking for many more hours, but I hope that it brought you added value, and now you understand the different perspectives and also the challenges that we are all going to face in relation to the new upcoming regulatory standards. So thank you very much, guys, for your insights, valuable insights, and feel free to reach out to our internal team in Safetica if you have any specific questions about your situation. So thank you very much, and have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.